My husband betrayed me, so I made him pay. While he spent his night sneaking around with a younger banker, I was quietly gathering evidence. He thought I was weak, but in the end I took his house, his money, and custody of our child. He lost everything because he underestimated me. This is the story of how betrayal turned into my revenge, a story of how one woman's heartbreak became her greatest weapon. And before we dive deeper into it, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. After that night when I saw him sitting across from her, a younger banker with her polished smile and her hand brushing against his as though she belonged in his life, the questions began to consume me. Who exactly was she? Why would my husband of nearly 2 decades risk his family, our home, and the future we had built together for someone who barely knew him? Was she simply a distraction? Or was she part of something larger? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a careless fling, because every late-night dinner, every unexplained absence, and every dollar that went missing from our account seemed to trace back to her. The betrayal was obvious, but the depth of it, that was still hidden. And the more I searched for answers, the more I realized this wasn't just about infidelity. What I uncovered wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated attempt to strip me of everything I had, everything I worked for, and everything I loved. For more than 15 years, our life appeared as steady and as ordinary as any other family living in the suburbs of America. We had a modest but comfortable home, a yard where our child played on summer afternoons, and a routine that gave the impression of stability to anyone looking in from the outside. We paid our mortgage together, we managed our joint accounts with discipline, and on weekends we hosted barbecues that filled our driveway with laughter and neighbors who often told me how lucky I was to have a husband like him. Holidays were spent traveling to visit family or decorating the house with lights and ornaments. And in those moments I believed we were unshakable. I believed in him. I trusted him. I thought our partnership was built on loyalty, on the years of effort we had poured into each other, and on the family we had created. But then small things began to change. At first they were subtle enough to excuse away. He began working late. Returning home hours after dinner had grown cold on the stove. His phone, once left casually on the counter, became something he clutched tightly, even carrying it into the bathroom or placing it face down at the table when a message came through. When I asked, he smiled and told me not to worry. That business was just busy. That I was imagining things. I wanted to believe him. For the sake of our child, for the sake of the years we had built together, I forced myself to believe. But then there were the extra trips to the bank. At first it sounded responsible. He claimed he wanted to handle deposits, keep up with the mortgage, make sure our accounts were in order. I even felt grateful that he was managing the stress of our finances so I didn't have to. But with every trip, with every hour unaccounted for, unease crept in like a shadow I couldn't shake. What unsettled me most was not the trips themselves, but the way he changed when he returned from them. He looked lighter, as if the burden of the long marriage we had carried together was being lifted from him. But not by me. I told myself not to be paranoid, that this was just a season, that marriages go through rough patches. But deep down, a knot of doubt tightened inside me every time his phone buzzed in the middle of the night, every time he adjusted his tie and left the house with a smile I hadn't seen in years. For months I tried to push the thoughts aside, convincing myself that trust meant not questioning, that love meant giving him the benefit of the doubt. But then came the day that shattered the fragile picture I had been holding together. One ordinary afternoon, I stopped by the bank to make a deposit, something simple, something I had done countless times before. And that was when I saw her, smiling across the desk, leaning closer than any banker ever should, her hand brushing against his, as if they were the only 2 people in the world. In that moment I knew. This wasn't about late nights at the office, or stressful days at work. This was betrayal, real and undeniable. And then one day I saw her. The day I walked into that bank was the day my world shifted forever. I hadn't planned it. I was simply running errands, carrying a stack of checks and bills that needed depositing. It was the kind of ordinary afternoon I had lived through countless times before. But as I stepped through those glass doors, the air-conditioned lobby buzzing softly with the sound of printers and quiet conversations, my eyes landed on something that froze me in place. There he was, my husband, not hunched over paperwork, not conducting the kind of serious transaction that might justify another one of his many trips here. Instead, he was leaning across the banker's desk, laughter spilling from him in a way I hadn't seen in years. And across from him sat a younger woman, mid-20s, with her polished hair framing her face, her professional suit just a little too fitted, her smile lingering a little too long. It wasn't just business. I knew it instantly. His hand brushed across hers so subtle anyone else might have missed it. But I didn't miss it. A wife never misses the gestures that tell the truth. My heart sank like a stone inside me. The air around me felt heavy, and I couldn't breathe. I slipped away before he noticed me, clutching the deposit slip with trembling hands. In that instant, denial was no longer possible. The late nights at the office, the phone glued to his hand, the sudden attention to his appearance, it all made sense now. And yet, as much as it hurt, I knew that what I had just witnessed was only the beginning. Over the weeks that followed, the nights out increased. Work meetings, he called them. Client dinners, he explained, rehearsing the same excuses over and over until they sounded almost believable. But the evidence began stacking against him in ways he couldn't control. One evening, while folding his laundry, a hotel receipt slipped from his jacket pocket. My hands shook as I unfolded it, reading the date, the time, the location, all during nights when he claimed he was too busy to come home for dinner. The lie was staring back at me in black and white, stamped with the logo of a hotel less than 20 minutes from our home. Then there were the phone calls. At 2 a.m, when the house was silent and I lay awake beside him, his phone would buzz. Sometimes he would get up and walk quietly into another room, his voice low, carrying only fragments I couldn't quite make out. Other times he would smile at the glowing screen, his fingers moving quickly, almost giddy, like a teenager discovering love for the first time. One night, when he had fallen asleep with the phone still clutched in his hand, I finally saw what I had suspected all along: flirty messages, promises of secret dinners, little notes of affection, and her name, the same younger banker I had seen at the bank that day. My chest ached as I read them, each word cutting deeper than the last. But when I confronted him, my world shattered even more. He didn't confess. He didn't apologize. Instead, he turned it all against me. He looked at me with cold eyes and called me paranoid. He told me I was imagining things, that I was insecure, that I was trying to ruin his career with my accusations. The man I had trusted, the man I had built a life with, was gaslighting me in my own home. For days, I questioned myself. Was I truly imagining it? Was grief making me blind, making me connect dots that weren't there? But then I remembered the hotel receipts, the late-night texts, the laughter at the bank, and I knew this was real. I tried to hold on, tried to believe that maybe this was just a phase, that he would come to his senses. But the signs grew louder, impossible to ignore. And then, one night, he didn't come home at all. When he didn't come home that night, something inside me broke. But as the hours dragged on, the tears dried and a new feeling rose within me. Determination. If my husband thought I would sit silently while he dismantled our marriage, he was wrong. If he thought I was too weak to fight back, he had underestimated me in the worst way. That night became the turning point. Hurt turned into resolve. Pain turned into strategy. I realized that I couldn't rely on his words anymore, only evidence. So, I started quietly building my case. Every time his phone lit up with her name, I took screenshots. Each message of affection, every late-night plan for dinner or hotel meetups. I stored them in a hidden folder. I dug through our joint accounts, and that's when the truth started to unravel even further. Bank statements revealed money transfers, thousands of dollars, slowly moving out of our shared funds and into an account I didn't recognize. I stared at the transactions with shaking hands, each withdrawal a betrayal stacked on top of the affair. This wasn't just about love. This was about survival. He wasn't only cheating on me, he was planning to leave me with nothing. One evening I followed him from a distance, parking my car just far enough behind his. I watched as he walked into a dimly lit restaurant, his hand brushing the younger banker's back as he guided her inside. They laughed, ordered wine, and left together an hour later. I snapped photos, each click of the camera sealing my resolve. I knew these pictures would one day speak louder than his denials. The most devastating moment came when I finally sat across from a lawyer, a woman who had seen stories like mine far too many times. I handed her the bank statements, the screenshots, the photos. She skimmed through them, her expression growing grim. Then she looked me in the eye and said words I'll never forget. "He's preparing to leave you. But before he does, he's draining you first. If you don't act, you and your child will be left with nothing." The words echoed in my head for days. Preparing to leave me, draining me first. I thought about the years I had spent standing by his side, the sacrifices I had made, the nights I had stayed up rocking our child while he claimed to be working late. And now, this was his plan, to take it all and walk away with her. That night, I stood over my child's bed, brushing back his hair as he slept peacefully. I whispered softly, my voice trembling, but steady enough for me to believe it. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Mommy has a plan." It was in that moment that my grief hardened into something unshakable. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about protection, about justice, about reclaiming the power he thought he had stripped away from me. Every day I gathered more, quietly, carefully, without raising suspicion. Texts, receipts, statements, photos. I built a fortress of truth brick by brick, knowing that the day would come when I would need to unleash it all. And as I closed my eyes each night, one thought kept me awake, sharp and clear. If he wanted war, I was ready. In the weeks that followed, my life became a performance. At home, I was the calm, trusting wife, the one who smiled, cooked dinner, and kissed him goodnight, as if nothing had changed. But behind that mask, I was documenting everything. Every lie, every excuse, every night he claimed to be working late. I logged the dates and times meticulously, storing them like ammunition for a war he didn't even know was coming. The banker's number flashed on his phone almost daily, and I took screenshots until my gallery overflowed. When money slipped quietly from our joint account into a secret one, I tracked every dollar. I cross-checked receipts, cataloged withdrawals, and built a timeline so detailed it would be impossible for him to deny. I was no longer just a wife. I was an investigator, and every discovery gave me more strength. He thought he was winning. At night, he would come home with that smug smile, convinced that I was still in the dark. He thought his lies were airtight, that his secret dinners and late-night hotel stays were hidden behind excuses of work pressure. But he didn't realize that his arrogance was fueling my strategy. The more careless he became, the stronger my case grew. When the court date finally arrived, I walked into that room with my head held high. He sat across from me, confident, even smirking, as if the outcome had already been written in his favor. He leaned over to his lawyer, whispering as though the world was his to control. But he didn't know what was about to hit him. One by one, the evidence came out. First, the screenshots of his texts with the younger banker, the flirty messages, the late-night rendezvous, the hotel arrangements. His smile faltered. Then came the bank statements. Thousands of dollars quietly siphoned away, proof that he had been preparing to abandon not only me but his responsibility to our child. His lawyer shuffled papers nervously, whispering urgently now, no longer smug. And then the photos, the pictures of him and the banker together at restaurants, his hand brushing hers, the kind of proof that even his denials couldn't erase. I watched his face crumble in real time. The man who had once believed he held all the power suddenly found himself cornered, every lie stripped bare in front of strangers, a judge, and me, the wife he thought was too weak to fight back. His arrogance melted into panic, his voice breaking as he tried to explain away the evidence. But it was too much. Too damning. Too complete. The courtroom grew heavy with silence as each piece of evidence stacked higher against him. His betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was undeniable. Undeniable in front of the law. I sat still, calm, collected, because I knew this was the moment all those nights of quiet suffering had been leading up to. The air in the courtroom felt heavy as the judge shuffled the files and finally spoke. His words carried the weight of finality, slicing through the silence. In that moment, my entire future, and the future of my child, hung in the balance. For months I had quietly endured betrayal, gathered evidence, and prepared myself for this exact day. And now, the truth was finally catching up with Michael. The ruling was swift, and it was devastating. For him. The house, the one we had built together, the one where our child took their first steps, where birthdays and holidays had been celebrated, it was awarded to me. The place he thought he could take from me, the very symbol of our family, was now legally mine. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing that my child and I would not be forced out of our own home. Then came custody. Michael had tried to paint me as unstable, as paranoid, as the nagging wife who drove him away. But the evidence I presented told a very different story. The late nights, the missing money, the neglect of our child, it was all there, undeniable. The judge looked directly at him and declared that full custody would be awarded to me. Michael's head dropped into his hands as if the ground had just disappeared beneath him. His voice, once so confident, was gone. Finally, the division of assets. For years, we had worked, saved, and built our lives together. But he had tried to drain those accounts behind my back. Every receipt I had collected, every bank statement I had tracked, came back to haunt him. The majority of our joint assets, everything he thought he could walk away with, were legally placed under my control. What was once his shield, his arrogance, crumbled right there in the courtroom. When the gavel came down, the sound echoed like the closing of a chapter. Michael walked out of that courtroom a shell of the man who had strutted in. He was broke, his reputation shattered, his plans with the young banker in ruins. The whispers followed him as he left, people shaking their heads at the man who thought he could outsmart not only his wife but the truth itself. And as for the young banker, the affair that had seemed so thrilling and reckless, the truth spread quickly. Word of their relationship traveled beyond whispers, and soon, the bank could no longer ignore it. She lost her job, her career derailed by the scandal she willingly stepped into. What they thought was a love story ended as nothing more than two lives in ruins, destroyed by lies and arrogance. For me, the victory was not about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming everything he had tried to strip away. That evening, I stood with my child at the front door of the house the court had declared ours. I placed the key into the lock, turned it slowly, and pushed the door open. The familiar creak of the hinges felt like music. My child ran inside, laughter echoing through the walls, and for the first time in months I felt peace. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Then I whispered to myself and to my child, words that carried all the weight of the battle we had just won. This is ours now, and no one will take it from us again. He betrayed me, and I made him pay. But betrayal doesn't just come from strangers, it can come from the person sleeping right beside you. For years, I believed in Michael. I believed in the vows we made, the family we built, and the trust I thought was unshakable. Yet all along, while I was raising our child and keeping our home together, he was secretly planning a life with someone else. When I look back now, the late nights, the excuses, the constant phone calls, it all seems so obvious. But love blinds us. Trust blinds us. And sometimes we refuse to see the cracks until everything falls apart. I often ask myself, what would I have done if I had ignored the signs? If I had forgiven him without seeking justice? Would Michael have stopped? Or would he have taken everything and left me and our child with nothing? That's the question I leave with you. If you were in my place, if the person you loved betrayed you with someone younger, drained your savings and planned to walk away, would you forgive? Or would you make him pay? For me, the answer was clear. I could not allow Michael to strip me of my dignity, my security, and the life I had built with my own hands. In the end, I didn't just fight for myself, I fought for my child, for the stability of our future, and for the justice we deserved. Some may say I was harsh, others may call it revenge, but I call it survival. So I'll turn it over to you. Was justice really served? Comment below and tell us what you would have done if you were in my shoes. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And before we close, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because it means the world to us to know how far these stories reach. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you thought this story was shocking, just wait until you hear about the wife who discovered her husband had an entire second family living just a few miles away. That story is next, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.